The intention of this video is to welcome you into an embodiment practice which is relevant right from the beginning of this journey. So while we really get into the primal rewilding and our visceral embodied nature a bit later on, from the very first day, I would welcome you into time for embodiment where you can really strip away all of the habitual ways we engage, often totally ignoring our body, just getting up and doing things and on phones and very externally active. And taking a time just to breathe, to move, to feel the body, to start building your own apothecary. So I've got some coconut oil. Sometimes I mix in some shea butter with it as well. Mixing in to that some things like lavender oil. What have I got here? Clove oil. That's can be hot, but you just experiment and guide what you can handle. Oregano oil is even hotter. I don't put that on my skin. I use that internally, just for back of the throat, like a single drop. It's pretty intense, but once again, self-inquiry and guide yourself. Peppermint oil, just for freshness. Tea tree oil, eucalyptus oil. You just experiment and explore and start to guide yourself by what feels like it enhances life, increases circulation, gets rid of parasites or bacteria, clears you out, detoxes, all that kind of thing. So it's just a concept, starting to build a bit of a self-care apothecary set. And having some kind of base oil like coconut oil is great because they can mix in with it, and it just enables us to connect with the skin. It's kind of like watering the skin, letting it feed, letting it drink. And it's a medium through which movement becomes easier, and encouraging you, once you've got that mix, or even before you've got that mix, to massage the surface of the skin with the intention of increasing circulation, setting up an intentional communication from your consciousness to this part of the body, releasing tension, becoming familiar with form, recognizing if there is emotional charge caught in the body. And also shaking free some of the habitual gestures, postures, expressions that might be kind of locked into our body because they're our default go-to, and we just therefore don't even bother to release it. I really think that sleep is quite an ingenious part of the design of this universe, where we need this reset time. Similar reset time happens through the generations with death in the life-death cycle, but every day it's a bit of a life-death cycle. We get to reset. So at times when life feels really overwhelming, and the first stages of lens 1, no one, nothingness, nonsense, is really about unplugging from these things which are playing us, so that we can not be always the effect of external stimulation or arbitrary rules or obligations, stories, but instead start to intentionally do something for ourselves, to be the cause point, to issue forth. So when we feel like life is running us, when we are harassed and worn out by our daily activities, taking a moment before going into the day and after the day, so after we wake up and before we go to sleep, can be a really beautiful way of reclaiming the sense of driving ourselves, of playing life, of having autonomy and sovereignty. So when I wake up, rather than reaching for a phone or technology, even before getting up, I'll often just breathe into my body, just lying there in bed. Move, stretch, be grateful for life, feel the freedom, just creating a bit of space before the tasks of the day stick to us. And similarly, at the end of the day, turning off devices, turning off lights, going into a place where I can just settle and come back to an objective perspective, or understanding that this too shall pass, or understanding the transient nature, the temporary nature of the days, and how when you're in a particular phase it seems all encompassing, but when you move beyond that it just becomes something that once happened, another chapter that's been closed. So regardless of how immersed we are in whatever's going on, taking that time at the end of the day to come back to something which has outlasted them. So if this daily practice starts now and goes for decades, whatever you are in, you'll remember at the end of each day, oh yeah, cool, so I'm coming back to myself. This practice has been going longer than this particular situation, and it will continue after this situation has been resolved. And it's this really nice point of reference. Our daily practice is our discipline, it's our devotion, but it's also a point of autonomy and control and self-guidedness, where this is what you choose to do regardless of whatever other stories are playing out. So taking that time at the end of the day to breathe, to soften, to come, I guess if you're looking at the chakra points, out of a more embodied survival state, from a belonging state, from a what I want to get out of the state, from a needing to integrate state, from a needing to express myself and be seen state, into a more overarching collective vision, understanding of actually what's playing out. And part of getting embodied is getting out of the mind. So I encourage you to be naked, to just feel all of the layers being stripped back, all of the arbitrary additions taken away, till it's just you as a human with the elements around you. And then to move, to get out of a concept of any kind of pose or structure or form, and just squidge and roll and feel and breathe, with the idea of having energy and fluids in the body circulate, sensation, being aware if there's a particular part of the body you haven't paid to attention in a while. Always looking to open, to mobilize, to allow. Particularly with the spine, obviously our brain and our spine are really pivotal parts of physiology. So rolling through the spine, undulating, shaking out perhaps, using sound as an extension of the movement, extending, contracting, softening. Softening is often equated with yin practice in the duality of yin and yang. Also thought of maybe as feminine and masculine, soft and hard. But I don't think they always have to be in opposition or either end of any kind of scale. I think that one leads very well to the other. So with open world, often what I use is, or I say it's the yin path to yang. It's a way to soften beyond the threshold so that we can come into an activated power. So I really like Kundalini Yoga. That's a whole other body of knowledge, and I encourage you, if you want to research it for yourself, some great practices. But basically they do repetitive actions, often linked with breath. And one of the most standout experiences I've had with that was doing a repetitive process. It's like a pistol grip. Your index finger is paired, your other fingers are clasped, raising the hands above the head with the biceps near the ears, extending through a straight spine, coupling it with the breath. So it's a bellows breath or fire breath, where you're bringing your belly button in towards your spine on the exhale, breathing out through the nose. Focusing more on the exhale and just allowing the inhale to happen naturally. And with that breath, kind of allowing the whole torso to lift, which includes the arms. So rather than just lifting from the shoulders, it's kind of lifting from the belly, coming up and pumping that space, which really activates the gut, activates, they often say there's three brains. Who's they? I don't know. The mixture of the Eastern and Western anatomy mapping. There are some people, and I ascribe to this concept of three brains. So obviously the brain, and whether or not that is the same as our mind is another debate. But anyway, this kind of center, our chest, our heart, can be linked to, I guess, love, feeling of connectedness, all this sort of thing. And then coming down to our belly, to our gut. What your gut instinct is your intuition, your knowing. And obviously with our digestion, that's extremely important as to how well our body is nourished, if we are getting rid of toxins. Also, our core is a key point of balance. I think if our core power is out, everything else is sort of pretty shaky. So activating through this fire breath, drawing the belly button in towards the spine on the exhale. You can speed it up. You sort of find your place where you're not going to cause a cramping. Sometimes if we go too fast with the breath, we can kind of seize up and we can't really have the fluidity we need. But you're just finding your pace. So anyway, that activity went on for quite a while when I was doing this particular Kundalini session. And I started to feel the threshold approach. I started to feel like my shoulders were too tight, too sore, couldn't keep going. That was the main thing. And then just this general anxiety. I feel it mainly in my heart, a little bit in my belly. This almost nauseous feeling of like, I got to stop. I can't keep going doing this thing. And they're just signals. And that's a key part of what I want to encourage, I guess, around the space of no one and nothingness, but definitely also going into embodiment, is understanding that our feelings and sensations are often just a signal that something is happening. We can sometimes equate them with an actual thing, like I'm feeling scared, therefore I am dying. Or I am hungry, therefore, once again, maybe it all leads to I am dying. There's some kind of threat to my survival. But all it means is there's a particular state, maybe in your belly, for example, if you're hungry, that's sending a signal. That's all it means. Sometimes it means you're a bit acidic as opposed to alkaline. So if you have something like bicarb soda or something that's like a green drink of some kind, you don't feel that same sensation. It's not necessarily because you've filled up with food. It's just that the chemical state has been shifted, so it's a different signal coming to us. And that's such a beautiful realization to experience, not just to come to it theoretically, but to actually have the embodied experience of, because it frees us from so many of the spurs, so many of the external, unintentional catalysts for our reactions and our behaviors. So in doing this practice, I got to a point where like, that's it, I can't keep going. And you could say that a yang approach would be to force your way through, just man up and keep pushing, you know. But I haven't found that to be the most effective way to access my power. Instead, a continual softening, breathing, releasing, becoming acquainted with a subtle softening in the subtle bodies. So it's easy to see my fist being tight and released. We've got a direct mechanical command over that. But how do I soften my brain? How do I soften the emotions around my heart? How do I soften the nervousness in my stomach? It's hard to teach that. I can talk about it, but it's really just something you need to explore and experience. And sometimes through analogies or imagery, for example, you can use your imagination. You can imagine your brain getting tight and then softening and opening up, getting tight softening and opening up. You might have muscles, like for example, the back of the head when you smile or pull your ears back or something, that kind of are in the vicinity of your brain. So like coupling those together might kind of help. You might imagine breathing into the space. So even though our lungs are in our chest, you can imagine the breath going into the brain. You might just have a moment of a realization or a relief emotionally or mentally, and you feel the mass or the pressure expand and release in the brain. All of these are doorways, they're all handles to allow us to start to become a little bit more direct in our interaction with the subtle, the energy bodies. And eventually you can kind of intentionally just go softening the back of the head, feeling that tension, expand and release. And I'm using my hands here as just an imagination tool to, I can feel they're obviously expanding, and that just helps my mind and helps my energy sort of match that. Similarly, can you go into your heart if you're feeling anguish or anxiety and just soften, expand, and release. In the belly, soften, expand, release. So that's a really beautiful ability to have. It's very relieving. And so coming to this threshold release technique point again. Oh, can't keep going. Anguish, nausea in the heart. Soften, yin, feminine, surrender. And it's distinguished from the mechanical action of movement. It doesn't mean when I surrender, I just go floppy like spaghetti. It's like I can keep doing this, but my energy softens and opens. I release. And it's through that practice that I cross the threshold where everything's softened. All of the pain and pressure released to my shoulders. And it suddenly became really easy. And I went from a point of like, I literally cannot do this anymore. My arms are going to break, to, oh, I could do this for as long as I want. And that is the threshold that I encourage you to explore, often through repetition, through looping actions, where we come mentally, not physically, we come mentally to a limit where we think we can't keep going. And I think that we have this coupled experience of the embodied reaction and then the mental reason or meaning. So we might feel angry and then I find a reason like, what the hell, this really frustrates me when you, etc. Or in this case, I'm feeling tension on my shoulders and the mind is like, this is going to damage, I'm going to tear a muscle. We find, and we're very mentally driven, so if we can find a good enough reason, we will then act differently. We'll have a different embodied experience. But as this is a discipline, we're looking at shifting beyond the automatic cattle prod zaps that we give ourselves, whether subconsciously or consciously through our mental reasoning. And we go through our underlying intention, which is I'm going to find the release beyond the tension. I'm going to allow this yin path of breathing, softening, loving, accepting, being present to expand beyond that threshold and open up into that yang energy, into that capacity to participate and continue going. So that's why I call it the yin path to yang. By surrendering and softening and allowing and opening, we actually then end up accessing our capacity to have power, to have intention, to participate, to penetrate, to do. So any exploration of such a thing, I encourage, always with self-responsibility of knowing what's really going to cause physical damage and what's not. And that's just an aspect of knowing yourself, working up on a gradient step by step, meeting different thresholds and expanding, next threshold, expand, next threshold, expand, and also conditioning the body so it gets used to having a lot of energy, blood, oxygen, etc. move through it. So eventually you have a larger capacity physiologically, anatomically, physically to, it could be have impact, it could be to feel, it could be to breathe, it could be to squeeze, it could be to push. And then also I think that is like a channel, imagine like a cable that can therefore have a lot of electricity go through it. I do believe that enhances or expands our capacity to feel, to have bigger emotions come through us. You know, a big truck might drive past us on the highway, or a huge wave engulf us at the ocean. That's a kind of charge which goes from one form through us, whether directly or simply through our empathy. We take it on and we're shaken by it. And emotionally, some big event might happen in our life, and you know, some people are just rocked by it and get sick and just knocked off their feet for days. Other people, particularly when you allow it, see, that's the yin path. If it happens and you tense against it and you block and you don't want to feel, it's like a lot of yang. You are pushing against the force. If you're an open channel, all of the energy, the emotion rushes through. You cry, you shout, you breathe, but you've got that channel. Your body can have that amount of charge or energy embodied and flow through it and disperse through it, balanced back out into harmony. And you've softened, but you're actually powerful. You're strong. You've got endurance. You have stamina. You have presence. And that is a key part of this practice that I'm welcoming you into, the yin path to yang. So find an edge through repetition, gradually through embodied practices like just movement, breath, sounding. Get the idea you are cultivating this channel to experience more. Move and soften. I'm naked now, so I'm not going to necessarily get up and do all the movements I do, but just get into a squatting position, roll on your back, lie on the floor, stretch in different ways, twist, and know when you're doing something that's jamming a joint or a nerve. You don't want to twist your back and put things out, and sometimes combining things like a twist and a pull or a push and a lift, and sometimes two things can end up putting your back out and things. So just be gradual with it, but you'll find a place where you can be very dynamic and it can be fun. And circular motions, I think, are a good way to go about it because they're fluid. They often don't jar the joints. You know, if you've got a very linear way of punching, for example, it can really jar the elbow joint. So what about ways of keeping fluidity in the body, or whipping around and whipping back? You know, any of these kind of circular motions, I think, are quite natural and gentle in the joints. So you're rolling on the back, coming up onto the shoulders, not putting pressure on the neck, finding different ways that you can angle your body, breathing, rolling, and getting into it's almost like a trance state where you're not calculating, you're not deciding, you're going with the momentum. It's a contact dance with life. You're activating, you're breathing, you're feeling the friction on the skin and in the muscles, bringing blood, the fascia, which I don't really know that much about. I really want to research more about, but this idea of just the different energy and fluids in the body, it's a really key part of our sensation and our holistic well-being, allowing things to move through the body. So yeah, research, know what's going on inside your body. Research about the fascia, about the, in Chinese medicine, they also refer to the triple warmer, which I believe also has to do with the distribution of energy and heat in the body. Meridian lines, there's so many different ways that we explain what's going on. Meridian being kind of like also an energy channel where things can flow. The acupressure points, looking at the different places along these meridian channels where you can activate a signal and therefore kind of activate the running of an entire energy channel. So it could be here, it could be under your collarbones, on your chest, on your hand here, between your ribs. And you can research the technique or the technology of meridian points and acupressure points, or go and get an acupuncture session where they actually put needles in to stimulate those signals. But you can also just feel intuitively into your body and just take the time to feel along the bones, the muscles, the tendons, and feel, where are your lymph nodes? Are there any bulges? Where is the joints and the tendons, the tension? And if there seems to be a place that's really sending a signal, maybe just hold that point for a bit. If there's a knot in the muscle, maybe hold it and allow it to soften. If you intuitively feel stuck, you might feel something on your ribs and you're like, I just want to stretch that. I just want to breathe and rub that. make a sound. There's an emotion there. Just being present with it. Not always being stuck on an expected outcome, like I want to get rid of this emotion, because that's a rejection. It's not really an allowing or surrendering or softening. It's just allowing it to be present. And you might end up feeling, oh wow, when you research, wow, that point I was rubbing related to my liver point, and that has to do with anger or whatever it is. So I do think that regardless of how many great people have been before us, regardless of it's like this hierarchy. We are sometimes born into this concept that there were gods or geniuses or people much better than us before us. And we do stand on the shoulders of giants. I love this concept that we are benefiting from all of the hardship and all the genius and all the progress that has gone before us. But I think it's so important to remember that all these amazing ancestors, were people like us, often with access to less than we have access to. So I do think that we have the capacity to self-learn and to intuitively navigate and to discover. And of course, it's therefore more unique to us as well. So I highly recommend self-inquiry, deep listening. And deep listening for me is simply opening in stillness without even knowing which channel the communication will come across. If I'm listening for a song, I'm expecting a sound. But a listening for me is just being receptive. And you might have a flash of an image, you might have an emotion, you might have just kind of a sense to move your body in a certain way. These are all forms of listening where we stop, we unbuckle our mind from the expectation of what signal is to come, and we just kind of scan. So encouraging you to enjoy that practice, to massage the body, to breathe, to move, to roll around, to soften, to apply the yin to yang approach of going over thresholds. Cold showers is another really beautiful one when you feel the cold water, particularly coming on your central nervous system, the brain and the spine. If there's a tendency to brace against it, then just really breathe and soften and open and feel how it flushes the nervous system. All those signals go along the nerve endings across the synapses, and it's just like, once again, flushing that channel, opening, opening, opening. And very soon it's not that unpleasant. And we see the detailed, interconnected conglomerate of consideration and experience. This thing which was going to be so abhorrent and horrible, the cold actually dissipates really quickly and it's not cold anymore. The water's the same, but our experience of it is different because of our energy and our mind and this sort of multi-layered channel of decisions and reactions that we go through. And therefore we get into this place at the end of doing this practice regularly where we are open to life. Our window of tolerance is wider. Our ability to experience different things means that we are present for more ends of the spectrum. Things can be cold or they can be warm. They can be chaotic and fast. They can be still and peaceful. They can be very external and imposed or very internal and driven. There's all these different dualities, and we can sort of straddle more of life, therefore experience more of life. And I think that is ultimately a form of celebration and prayer, to show up for life and witness it, to be able to be there when things are loud and be there when they're quiet, be it where it's other or self. And ultimately, I mean, that's for me, one of the prime functions of a human being is just to witness life, witness the sunsets, witness culture as it writhes and froths and forms itself, mutates into a different form of civilization. Be there for your partner as they emote and go through different things. Be there for yourself as you feel things. That's just a simple thing, and it's such a privilege to have this point. I am a human. I'm in a body. I'm peering out from here, and that is something that I get to do for, maybe 100 years. And I've got all these senses. And not only do I have these senses, but they plug into a subjective experience. And so to work that muscle of experience, for me, it just makes so much sense as a way of showing up to life. And regardless of the confusion about why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? And what are we doing as society? All these kind of things. Underlying it all is the capacity to receive our senses and to open that window of experience and willingness to receive so that we can let more life in. Hey, so hopefully that feels natural and yet approaches some edges. It feels doable and achievable and also expansive. I hope it opens a door to mastery of self through self-love, self-activation, inquiry, releasing a lot of the forms and patterns of techniques, and just coming back to simple things at a window, ideally twice a day, after you wake up, before you go to sleep, to breathe, to move, to sound if it feels right, to soften, to reconnect, and remember that objective point of like, I'm still here, regardless of what stories come and go. At the end, it's here, I'm me, I'm in a body, and I'm witnessing existence. Huge love. Thank you for playing.